Here we go. What's up, STS Nation, and welcome to another episode of Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that promises to bring you the very best guests in all of true crime. And guess what? Great Scott, it's time for your True Crime Fil, a show so good it happens every Friday at this time, 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, with our best guests. Today, in a blue hue, America's most respected detective, Fil Waters. He spent decades in law enforcement, becoming an expert at obtaining criminal confessions. I should have wrote this down, Phil. I think you said you spent 33 years is it 33 years in law enforcement, Phil? Correct me on this.
Correct.
And how many is homicide?
23.
So 33 years, 23 years as a homicide detective. He investigated more than 400 homicide cases. He is also a Marine, and he's the owner of Kindred Spirits Investigations. He also starred in the show The Interrogator. And then you've got Agent Scott Duffey. He is the director of Wilmington University's Criminal Justice Institute. He is a retired FBI special agent. He handled all kinds of violent crime matters, including gangs, bank robberies, and fugitive task force cases. And prior to that, served 5.5 years as a Pennsylvania police officer. A quick reminder, please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We are at Podcast STS. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. Please leave us a review if you are listening. And you can also find us at Patreon. And believe it or not, this isn't a formal announcement. I'll make a big deal out of this next week. But the chief marketing officer has launched the merch store, which I think is available on YouTube. So I know Phil next week is going to go out, and instead of a Hawaiian shirt, we'll have an STS shirt on. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'll even get him a discount code. He needs it.
That would be wonderful.
He only drives a Ferrari. He needs the help. Phil, I wasn't even planning on doing this, and it's probably going to get us in trouble right out of the gates. But I think that you said you wanted to address a couple of things.
Yes.
We did not discuss this formally. We talked about something unrelated, and it came up. So the floor is yours. Just try to leave me with.
I'll try to make it brief.
Also try to leave me at least 3 STS Nation viewers once you're done speaking.
Well, I mean, the people. I'm not saying what I'm going to say to offend anyone. But on the other hand, I know this will sound cold. This will get a lot of it doesn't matter to me if you are offended, because there are a lot of people running around out there that they make it that's their job, is to be offended. But my normal practice has been to never comment about the comments on any podcast, any show that I've been on, anything that I've been involved in with media since about 2015. I had one of my sages in media told me long ago that don't comment and leave it alone. So I have done that. However, last week, after Joel, you opened the political Pandora's box.
My fault.
Well, you know what? It was, I don't care, but, it happened.
I mean, it was a crime story. It was a guy that got arrested for leaking classified information.
Right.
So it really
it's all
shouldn't
related
be
it's all related to what we talk about.
Yes.
But obviously it unleashed the Kraken for all those, I think the term I used last week, all those bedwetters that, get upset about that kind of stuff. So having said that, there were some comments made after last week's show that I wanted to address. One is in a humorous way. One is in an informative way. And the last one is in a more serious way. The first one is that a lot of people, because of some things that I said, and this is no disrespect to your former employer, Joel.
Yes. Don't worry about that.
But you know, he watches Fox News. This is what they said on Fox News. Fox News, Fox News, Fox News. Now, what I want to inform those people is that I do not watch Fox News. And evidently, they watch it more than I do. So I do not watch Fox News. So I thought that was really funny. I thought that was very humorous. And I enjoyed being accused of being a Fox News watcher when I'm not. So that's the humorous part. And I hope they continue watching Fox News. And, you know, I speak the truth. So if Fox News is speaking that truth, well, then good for Fox News. But I don't watch those folks.
Fox News has 700+ million problems they're dealing with.
Right now. Well, you know, that's a whole nother thing, right? Yeah. So and then the second thing is informative. So there is a person that has done this a couple of times where, Joel, you've asked me a question. I have provided you an answer. And then later on, when you post the podcast and people are watching it, so forth and so on, this person puts on there, Fil needs to be more prepared for answering those questions. He's not prepared. And then they, so very kindly, they provide the answer to the question. What I want to inform this person is that when you ask me those questions, we're live. And those questions have not been answered officially when I answer them. So I'm answering them based on what I know at that moment, in that live moment when you ask me the question.
Correct. And we do not share
them that they need to be a little bit more prepared about watching the podcast later on, because it is a recording and the answer to those questions comes out after we have gone off and the recording has been posted.
And we never, by the way, I never send questions ahead of time. Everything is just done in the moment to Fil's point.
So I just want to inform that person that please prepare yourself a little better when you watch the video recordings of the live show. Okay. Now, the third one is more serious. In last week's show, and this may be a result of the politics, I don't know, but I got the impression that this person or persons, I'm not sure if it was one or two people, had been posting, and I'm assuming they posted on all of your many, many podcasts with many, many guests and many, many different people. But their post was regarding you and your mother. And I read it. I thought it was disrespectful. I thought it was just some person in their parents' basement who is trying to be a virtue signaler and getting into an area that is non-existent. So they made some castigating remarks about you, regards to your mother, and what I want to tell those people or that person is that they have no idea what the great relationship is between you and your mother. She has a great, considering all the things that she's been through in her life, an amazing sense of humor. And you and your mother, you play off of that because you love one another so much. And these people that are making those personal criticisms, I think, are out of line. And if they want to post that garbage, go somewhere else. Don't watch the show. And they owe you an apology and your mother an apology. And so what I would suggest for those people is have your mom come down in the basement and change the sheets on your bed. And then take your humorless person upstairs and let her make you a PBJ and some milk. And go on about your life and quit making negative comments that are hatefully based about people that you don't even know. So there you go. That's it. I'm off my soapbox.
Thank you very much. I was not expecting number 3. I did not even see those comments. I've been exceptionally.
Well, the message is don't mess with my brother Joel and his mama.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I was not expecting that. Thank you.
And Scott, you're just too nice a guy, and they never say anything bad about you, ever, ever.
Yeah.
And as another point, along with what I just talked about, Joel, I don't care what you say about me. I really don't. I don't care. So,
and
bring it on.
And that's why I love Fil. Fil has my back. Scott has my back. I appreciate it. I was really not expecting that. We did not discuss this. Fil just said he had a couple things to say.
Yeah, Joel didn't know I was going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, and they say don't mess with Texas, but don't mess with Fil. And I've got Fil's back too. So there you go. Moving on here with the show, by the way. We're going to get to this. It's just Robbie. He writes, poor Colby. That is Colby Ryan, the son of Lori Vallow, who has no more siblings left. And the mother is going to probably spend life behind bars. It's just Robbie says he even moved to Rexburg, Idaho in search of solace. And you know what they gave him? No peace. It has been rough going for him. Ketchup here in South Florida. Happy Aloha Friday, STS Nation and best guests. Hit the like button. Shaquille Oatmeal. Someone commented, don't read all the comments. But you know what? It's my show. And I like the comments, especially on Fridays. Happy Friday from wet Oregon, the wet Oregon coast, and hello from New Mexico, and Julie Frews in the UK. So here's a story that is of particular interest to me. And again, I did not tell Fil or Scott I was even going to discuss this today, but I'm curious to see what STS Nation has to say about this. Lyle and Erik Menendez. Scott and Fil, are you familiar? Scott, Lyle, and Erik were guys, brothers, a couple years apart. They alleged that their father was both mentally and physically abusive. Things went haywire, and they murdered their parents. I believe it was all the way back in 1989. They stand trial in the early 90s. They are convicted. They have been in prison since that time. The full disclosure on this is I grew up and I played tennis at the East Brunswick Racket Club, a shoddy little tennis club in East Brunswick, New Jersey. East Brunswick happens to be sort of equidistant from both Princeton and my hometown of Highland Park. So growing up, I would play tennis on court number 2, and the Menendez brothers would play tennis on court number 1 because they were a million times better than me. They were college athletes. I think one played at Princeton. And so I knew them, and I knew a lot of people that knew them, and I had the same tennis coach as those guys. And when this trial went on, I knew everybody kind of involved. And I'll never forget, one time I heard a story about some friends of mine that were invited to a party at the Menendez's home in Princeton, New Jersey. And someone spilled, it's like a high school party, and someone spilled red wine on the white carpet. And I remember hearing that Lyle and Erik's dad was going to flip out. And it was not a rational flipping out. Lyle and Erik were incredibly fearful that this happened, that the father would find out, and all hell would break loose. So fast forward 30-something years later, and a member of the band Menudo. Fil was a big fan back in the day, the boy band Menudo. And a former band, a member of the boy band, alleges in a new documentary series that the father, this same father who was in the music industry, had raped him when he was a child. The documentary is called Menendez and Menudo, Boys Betrayed. The member of the band is Roy Rossello, and his allegations come 27 years after siblings Lyle and Erik Menendez were convicted of first-degree murder in the 1989 slayings of their parents, Jose Enrique Menendez and Mary Louise Kitty Menendez, and they were sentenced to life in prison. Scott, since you have not had a chance to weigh in yet, what about this, that 27 years later, 27 years later, these guys have been serving prison time this whole time. A high-profile former band member comes out and basically verifies, and that was the whole defense, that these guys were badly abused and they just snapped. And now you've got someone who, for whatever reason, 3 decades later, is corroborating the story. What do you make of this?
Mm. By means of, are they telling the truth? I mean, I believe they're telling the truth. You're talking about children, right? No matter what, they've been sexually, physically assaulted, and whether it be within the family or just outside the family. So I take it these are the father was also in the music industry, or that he was a friend of the Menendez. So
I
thereby,
believe that so this is the Menendez's father, and I believe he
yeah,
managed the boy band Menudo.
got
So
it.
he was, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about, regardless, male, female, and being sexually assaulted at a young age, whether a juvenile or a very um, young adult coming into an industry. You're talking about a tremendous amount of guilt associated with it, right? That should never be on the shoulders of a victim, but nevertheless, time has told, history has revealed that it is a very difficult thing to manage. And so you're talking about um, two brothers who, from what I have gathered over the years, seeing different things that have been posted about them, are model citizens, right? One peeler or another trying to, um, you know, uh, um, always providing the same story, and then to have somebody that had finally come to whatever position in their life where they are able to say, "Hey, enough with the guilt, enough with the shame. I don't need to bear this," and so thereby, I'm telling my story for all that it's worth. So, kudos to them. It's it's a tremendous weight, and to shed that weight, um, absolutely commendable.
An interesting take there. By the way, Phil's adopted daughter here, Abby Taha. I was informed
There she is. How
it,
you
ri-
doing, daughter Abby?
it rhymes with ha ha ha. So Abby Taha ha. What up, party peeps? She says. Back to a serious subject here, Phil. So the Menendez brothers alleged during their trial, as I was just saying, that they had been sexually, physically, and emotionally abused since they were young children, and said that they acted out of fear and hatred when they shot their parents to death in the Beverly Hills mansion. By the way, the mother was they. It was a very vicious double murder. I mean, they shotgunned them, blasted them in the mother in the face multiple times, I believe. And they contended that the mother basically just turned a blind eye to all this. Now, defense attorneys, Phil, said that the siblings feared that their parents would kill them after they threatened to expose the alleged abuse. But back then, a judge deemed all testimony of sexual abuse irrelevant and inadmissible. Does this change the case? I know you're not a lawyer, but you've been around enough cases. Do you think they might be able to get a retrial here, or I don't know, even have their convictions vacated based on this sort of admission by someone else who's a high profile guy or once was?
No.
Please expand. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say that.
Well, here's what I will say to that. That whole case, the trial. I mean, the lawyer ended up either falling in love with one of those guys or fooling around with one of those guys. I mean, she was a nut job. The whole story about why they did what they did. I watched portions of it, a lot of it, just for the interview value of watching those guys, their testimony, watching them talk about it, and so forth and so on. In my opinion, I didn't see any kind of true emotion or emoting anytime they spoke about this, especially when the younger one was talking. It appeared to me that he had been coached by the older brother. So I my sense was that these guys, for whatever reason, And let's suppose that was the reason. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that yeah, Dad was diddling those boys, and Mama knew about it and didn't say anything about it. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry, that will not justify them taking their parents' lives in the brutal, horrific way they did it. So, will they get another trial based on some person coming out that was with Menudo and the father diddled him? And this is, what is this now? 30 years later?
27 years, I think.
How many?
I think it's 27.
27, almost 30 years later.
Since they were convicted.
So these people that come up with this stuff, the only way, well, in normal in the normal world, not necessarily in the world we live in now, but in the normal world in the criminal justice system, you don't get a retrial, and unless you have a piece of evidence that is so overwhelming that it would cause a retrial to occur. For a judge to be able to say, you know what, that piece of evidence is so critical that we didn't have before, that yes, there needs to be a retrial, and yes, that piece of evidence needs to be presented along with all of the other evidence. So I don't think that it's going to make any difference. I can't imagine a judge ever, based on that, saying, oh yeah, the boy band thing, let's have another trial. I just don't see that happening. And given, and this is one of these cases that has been examined and dissected and analyzed over and over and over again for the last 25 plus years. And now all of a sudden somebody pops up and says, oh yes, I was in Menudo and this is what happened. Well, okay, I mean, I'm sorry that happened, but is it going to have an effect on what these guys are, what's happened to these guys? No, I don't think so.
Scott, so as I mentioned, at the time, prosecutors, they rebutted the brothers' claims, and this is important to show the other side. They rebutted the claims of abuse, alleging instead that they wanted their parents millions. The parents were very wealthy. They had moved to Beverly Hills, I believe, during or after when they were in college. They said that they hated their father and included their mother as a victim because she would have just been a witness in this murder, and that's why they killed the mother. In closing arguments, one prosecutor described Jose Menendez as simply an absentee father who pushed his sons to achieve, not a man who was abusing them. The father was a Cuban immigrant, I believe, and he was known to be very tough on them. This whole abuse allegation has been debated back and forth, and then obviously this just came out with the guy from Menudo. But Erik Menendez was quoted recently as saying, I always hoped and believed that one day the truth about my dad would come out. But I never wished it for it to come out like this. This was after the documentary, the result of trauma that an other child has suffered. So just your reaction to this, Scott. It sounds, as you were saying, that this guy took many, many years to muster up the courage. But I guess the same question to you as I just asked Phil, the court of public opinion can be very loud. Do you think this will have some sort of ripple effect on the justice system and that maybe they will be retried?
Yeah, I would agree with Phil. You're talking about a couple of different things here. Let's just say, for argument, everything is true. The abuse, of many different ways, and then you have a corroborating, close-knit friend, colleague, family member, whatever, that corroborates it. Whether you corroborated it back then versus today, of course, now lots of time has passed. So in the court of public opinion, you'll get sympathy. But I wouldn't think, going back to, or even the standards today, to justifiably take a life is tremendous. The bar is extremely high. And so there may be tremendous sympathy for what somebody has suffered through. you then have to separate that from what is being investigated, and that ultimately is a brutal homicide. And so you're talking about taking the life of two people, not just the abuser, but two people, as opposed to, and I know we are all simply spectators to this, right? To outsiders looking in, but to be able to walk away is always the call, to walk away in some shape or form. And I would think, especially Phil and I, having long years of law enforcement, how we have seen, and this is getting into a whole nother, how many victims we have seen abused, where homicide is not at play here, but you are going from one domestic to another. And it is easy for us as a law enforcement officer who spends a few minutes at that call, and if a judgment is made that there's nothing for me to take this further by removing one of those parties, and you provide victim information, uh, um, spousal, domestic abuse information, and hope that they seek a remedy by seeking help, seeking resources to help somebody to leave, especially if the abuser is the sole source of income. But homicide now is a separate issue. It is a major issue, and the bar is set very high. So even in the case of victimhood of such tremendous abuse, could they ultimately say, I had no other option, life was imminent, injury to me, or serious bodily injury, or death, threat of death was imminent, and that is why I did what I did? That's ultimately, what has to be decided upon. And so even though if we are looking at the fact that they actually were abused, including um, the band member, then so be it. You will win public opinion of sympathy, but not an excuse for doing what you did. It is not an excuse. It can never be accepted as an excuse, especially when there are so many other, even if they are even if they are difficult. For example, going out on your own and whatnot. But ultimately, two lives were taken. Two lives were taken, and that it must be judged in and of itself. That's the way I see it, and I would imagine even today's standards.
And I've got another little bit on this quote from the band member Roy Rossello from Menudo. Phil, he alleges in this docuseries that Jose Menendez molested, drugged, and raped him when he was a teenager, performing with the Puerto Rican boy band. And Jose Menendez at that time was the head of RCA Records. He's now 51 years old. He was a member of the band from 83 to 86. And he said in a quote here, "That's the man here that raped me. That's the pedophile. It is time for the world to know the truth." And he says there's a glimmer of hope now for the Menendez brothers. Their defense attorney, a guy named Alan Jackson, came out and said the same thing. There could be a glimmer of hope. And Lyle Menendez, the older brother, said, "We've heard rumors that something might have happened with Menudo through the years." And he goes, that would have made a difference at the trial. If this had come out in the early 90s, would it have at least alleviated their sentence?
Well, look, this guy comes out 30 years later, and I question, and that's not to say this didn't happen, but how do you corroborate this? How do you corroborate this accusation this guy is making? Based on Menendez brothers using the same crap to go in and shoot their dad 6 times and their mom 10 times with a shotgun? I'm just telling you. And then the 6 months after that occurred, what are they doing? They're on a spending spree. They're out buying cars and all sorts of stuff. So if their story would be more believable, in my view, if they'd have done what they did, not the overkill thing, because their story initially was that the mafia did it. Mm-hmm. So that scene was one of overkill, which tells me, knowing what little I know about it, is that this was a planned event. Their mom and dad are watching television, and they had their plan together, and their purpose was to go in there and overkill to support their alibi, which that this was the mafia who did this. So you cannot look at these types of investigations in a vacuum, and some guy comes out 30 years later and says, you know what? His dad sexually assaulted me, did all these horrible things to me, and think that that's going to change the outcome, the consequences of what they did. So I just don't believe, I think this is, if it did happen, I'm sorry for this individual that it happened to, but over the last few years, the last decade or so, we have seen these people all of a sudden coming out of the woodwork and want to tell us about all their horrific experiences and so forth and so on. And all these people did all these things. And I don't know if they happened. You know, they may or may not have happened. But again, the question becomes, why are you waiting so long to talk about it? And then what's the motivation behind it? And I'm sorry, but most of these stories, they aren't about justice. They're about the Benjamins. And so I just don't think this will have, the defense attorney can say what he wants to say. There's too many, you got to remember there's a whole bunch of evidence. Yeah. And this one guy popping up and saying that, I think it has zero effect on that conviction.
I mean, as to why so long, I think, you know, the argument could be made that there's tremendous trauma involved. It just, you know, took years, whatever. But, okay. But Phil, I mean, in your esteemed long career, I'm sure you have investigated homicides where the children or a child killed the parent. What is usually the reason? Is there a singular most reason that children commit homicide against their parents? Is it usually money, motivated by money?
Only one of three reasons people kill people: sex, money, drugs, or money. That's it. So this one, to me, and now I guess if you listen to them and believe their story, that it was the sex part, that's what caused them to kill their parents. But then you look at how they responded afterwards. They go on a spending spree. I mean, their dad's a multimillionaire. Their parents are they live there in Beverly Hills, for crying out loud. So to me, this was a couple of spoiled brats that are so self-absorbed that they believed that they deserve whatever their parents had accomplished and accumulated over years. They wanted it now. And I would bet that the discussion was more like, Dad, buy me a car. Dad, buy me this car. Dad, do this and this and that. Dad, spend this money on me. And he's telling them, we're not doing that. He's telling them that word that all children hates to hear. No. And they were, I'm sure they were spoiled to a degree. And it just turned in, you know, once that ball starts rolling, it just gets bigger. And these two guys didn't have the character to respect their parents and do what they were told and be better young men, productive young men when they got older and could reflect back and say, you know what, I'm glad my parents told me no. Now that's just my pure speculation. But the facts are, the evidence leads to the truth. These guys gunned down their parents in a horrific way to present a story to authorities that they thought they were going to get away with so they could run out and spend their parents' money that they just inherited as a result of them murdering them.
And we are going to move on in one quick scintilla of a moment. But Scott, have you ever said no to your children? That's number one. I can't see it. And number two, by all accounts, these guys have been model inmates for close to 30 years. You think a judge would have some sort of, I don't know, empathy and either vacate or allow another trial?
Personally, no, I don't think so. I agree with what Fil is saying. Ultimately, and I think that, as you said earlier, Joel, because I remember watching much of it, but a lot of it I don't recall. But if a judge heard, as opposed to the brothers holding on to their true reason of sexual assault and then coming out later through a book or Netflix series or whatnot, but if they said that back then and the judge discarded that as not even admissible, and that's real time, right? And to say, okay, let's see what the evidence is. I think the judge was clearly making a very stated fact that regardless of what their history is, and let's just say it is true for this sake of argument, that it is not relevant because of the type of brutality that was used in the crime and planning and had, as Fil had said, what they had done afterwards and the lying. So no, I think ultimately, yeah, in the court of public opinion, they may have a lot of support, but for the sake of, at least from what I know of and experience, that ultimately the crime of a double brutal homicide was, ultimately who did it, they did it, and they were convicted and sentenced. So I don't see any change whatsoever.
And we will now pivot to the evildoer, as Fil calls Brian Kohberger, and we will end up with Lori Vallow Daybell. So I've got the whole show mapped out. Susu says, merch, yay, followed by, please tell us we can get it in the UK, Joel, followed by Ketchup saying merch 100. My wife, aka the chief marketing officer, will probably say, why did you announce that? You can find it. I think there's a link on the YouTube homepage for Surviving the Survivor. And then at Podcast STS on Twitter, I think there is a link tree there. And on Instagram, Surviving the Survivor, there is a link tree there. And other than that, I know nothing about the merch, but I will have my wife explain it, and then I will pass along the information. But look at this. I married a stoner. What about a Hawaiian-themed merch shirt? Now we're talking. And Fil,
I like it.
And Jen says, doesn't look like Fil will comply with the shirt change, but you know, he might. Amy in Boston says hello. Andy School says hello. Jennifer says, love the Hawaiian shirts. You rock, Fil. Julie Frew says, maybe a shirt that says bedwetters. Haha, go Fil. Okay, so Brian Kohberger. This was reported, but now there are additional reports. It was originally being reported by, I believe, Ashley Banfield at News Nation, and Fil appears on there. But now Chris Cuomo had additional reporting saying that there was rampant sexism by Brian Kohberger. University of Idaho murder suspect Brian Kohberger was known for his rampant sexism among those he worked with. He often made chauvinistic and condescending remarks toward women. He allegedly told Fil, he told female colleagues that men were going to take their jobs because women aren't as smart, according to someone at Washington State University. You have daughters, Fil, who are both smart and successful. Do you take issue with this personally? And do you, which I know you don't, but do you how do you assess this as an investigator? If you're speaking to the evildoer, let's say, in the interrogation room, and he makes misogynistic comments, how do you assess that as an investigator, as an interviewer?
Well, to get to that point in an interview, there's been a lot of discussion that's led us up to that question being asked, and letting them explain. You don't, you, at least in my practice of interviewing, you have to be very careful about making accusatory comments. I mean, there's a point in time where you're going to ask a direct question that's going to require a direct answer. But as you get to that point, you're going to be, when you hear something like that said, if he comes out and makes a comment that you believe is kind of giving you the lay of the land about how he thinks, what he thinks about women, then you allow him to expound on that, to explain that. So I would say to him, he's made this comment, so I would just ask, can you kind of explain to me how you come to that? How do you come to that conclusion? How do you come to that opinion about women? Tell me about what's happened in your life, and then let him fill in those blanks. But I think all of that talk, if it's true, I hate commenting on stuff that we haven't had verified, but if it's true, it'll come out in the trial. And while the prosecution doesn't have to prove motive, it certainly is going to be something the jury needs to hear if it's allowed. That this is how we get from A to B. This is how we get from going from being a guy that was kind of rejected by the areas that he wanted to get involved in some way, maybe rejected by women, so forth and so on. And then how do we get to the alleged, 4 beautiful young people being slaughtered on that night? So, there's not a one answer to this question, and it would be a continuing discussion about, tell me about that. Tell me about why you feel that way.
Rain Dancer, I find it very brave that people like Fil speak in public. I'm usually afraid of doing this, followed by DB. Fil, we like your answers better. The know-it-alls are the annoying people that don't realize no one wants to hear from them. Followed by no Brad's here. Disgusting about Carm. Disrespecting Carm is fighting words. For those who don't know, Brad in, I believe, New Zealand left us a 1-star review, and STS Nation had our back and flooded us with 5-star reviews. And so Buzz Off Brad has become an anthem of STS Nation. Hashtag Buzz Off Brad. Joel and Carm are the best, followed by Jessica. The Brads can kick rocks. Look at this. This is hilarious. Abby Taha, Phil's adopted daughter. Go Fil. He is the leader of the Carmi. I love that.
How about the Carmines?
The Carmines. That is hilarious. Leave Carm alone. Not okay. We are going to go to war, STS crew. So you don't mess with Carm. How about that? I know Carm is listening. So how about them apples? Scott, I mean, it is a massive bridge to cross, going from being misogynistic to murdering 3 young women. And don't forget, he also murdered a male. But what do you make of this? That, and by the way, I'm always skeptical because of this next line. The sources who wish to remain anonymous said Kohberger talked down to female students and graded them unfairly compared to men during his time as a teaching assistant. One female associate said that she told Chris Cuomo that someone she knew, not her, but another woman said that she believed her home was broken into the fall of 2022 by Brian Kohberger. So What about this? I mean, going from misogyny, allegations of being misogynistic, not liking women, to a quadruple homicide. That's quite the leap, isn't it, Scott?
Oh, it's, I think, a big leap. So everything that's being said, um, and let's just say, for argument's sake, that a lot of what's being said by these unknown sources, these sources have at least given tips to law enforcement. So where law enforcement has had the chance to go and speak with these people, interview them, and see if anything that they're saying, first and foremost, can be corroborated. It becomes evidentiary, and then will it go beyond that? So I imagine there are a flood of tips, both online and, to their phone base, where they are just going through lots and lots of information. I, I'm not so sure they can go through. Let's just say it's in the thousands. Hey, I'm a student, did this and did that, and so you get a few that can corroborate at least the mindset to what Phil is saying. As they build a motive, it supports a motive, but you're not going to spend a lot of time putting any of these people in a courtroom, because then you're just spending too much time. Because you're right. How do you make that leap from somebody? I'm going to bet there are many people with similar thoughts, and so are not killers, right? So you have to make that leap, and where ultimately they're solving a homicide, 4 homicides, and so it's great information for law enforcement to go through and say, okay, there's another piece of evidence that supports and backs up our theory of our motive, whatever their motive ultimately will come out in the end. But more importantly, they're spending the time on making sure every T is crossed and I is dotted with regards to their homicide investigation. That's ultimately what they need to prove in a court, and so everything that this guy is, or whether it's interesting with regards to the piece of information that he graded women more unfairly than men. It'd be interesting to see who that, or if that's information is correct, where that information came from. Being a teacher myself now, um, there's no public display of grading, so it'd be interesting to see, maybe people talking amongst each other, but ultimately it's very opinion filled. And when you get into the nitty gritty of evidence in a courtroom, that it's not going to matter unless it can be proven.
By the way, Scott, you skirted my earlier question, and I am a hardened journalist. Have you ever said, do you say no to your kids,
Mm,
or is the wife the disciplinarian?
mm. Can I plead the fifth? No, of course I say no, right? It's I will say this: my wife has a better poker face. She's if they know they can get one over on me, they're gonna go to mom, and she's gonna be like, get out of here. Your dad's a fool for even thinking that. So the she's we try to play the team approach. But I will admit that they probably come to me a few times earlier in their years when they know mom without a doubt said no, or they knew for sure that she would say no, and then come try to work me over. And if I wasn't clear in or wasn't paying attention very well, and I might have given a yes or a nod, and then I would hear about it later, and then of course I would return to my kids and make them pay. But uh, yeah, no, I believe the team approach is always the best. You have to be on the same page.
And Phil,
Boy, that was an amazingly political,
Let's
structured, middle of the road answer. So
Phil, did your kids ever come to you to ask for anything, or were they immediately just go to your wife?
in most cases, they would immediately go to my wife, and then she would say, "You need to go talk to your dad."
and you just said they would open their mouths and you'd go, no.
No. I would listen to them
You would.
and what their request was, and if it was that point in time where that kind of activity was allowed, that I thought was allowed, then they got to go, and I would give them a warning about what to expect, like going to a concert or going to football, whatever the activity was. But yeah, I was not going to be their friend because I was their father.
Phil,
And
did you have, I picture your home with an interview room in there. Was there an interview room in your home that had cameras up in the corner?
Oh no.
With a padlock on there? And when you were speaking to your kids, they were not allowed to put anything on a table. Would you give them a cigarette and a cup of coffee when they made their case?
No interview room of mine is ever locked.
Mm.
Never.
Is that for your safety?
Never locked. Well, that is because when I walk in there and I would get more people in a non-custodial environment, and the first thing I tell them is, you're not under arrest, you're not in custody, and you're free to leave. If that door is locked, then what I've just told them is not true. So I left that door unlocked, and they were free to leave, walk out of there.
In a modern day, in 2023, if you're interviewing a suspect, in the movies, you always see them lighting up a cigarette. Are they allowed to have a cigarette in a police department interview room in 2023?
Well, I will plead guilty to breaking the city ordinance in Houston, Texas, by allowing a couple of suspects that I was interviewing to enjoy a cigarette.
And would your boss, the lieutenant or whoever it is, would they come down on you and say, Phil,
No.
the PD is starting to stink like cigarette smoke? No.
No one ever said it. Well, it didn't really last that long. And there was always a caveat to it. You give them a little bit of something. You let them do something that that they can take part in, that's not going to have an effect. You can't promise them something that an innocent person or a person who has not done what you're talking to them about would tell you they did it just to get out of that room. So when you see these false confessions, that's what these detectives have set up, a situation where the person believes the only way they're going to get out of that room is just to confess to this freaking thing. And that's why you have false confessions. So no, you promise them something that will not fall in that category of swaying them into making a false confession about something they didn't do. Because if I offer them food, in other words, offer them a bottle of water, let them smoke a cigarette at their request, those are not things that are going to sway whatever information I'm trying to get out of them to get out of the room. So you accommodate them with what you can. And when I did the cigarette thing, I mean, I'd let them smoke, and then, because it was always, it is, you let me smoke a cigarette and I'll talk to you. I'll tell you about it. And I'd say, okay, so here we go. We light up the cigarette, and then they start doing the hemming and hawing again. And then I will say to them, hand me your cigarette. And they'll hand me the cigarette, and I put it out and I go, we're done. Well, but you said I could smoke a cigarette. I said, no. I said you could smoke a cigarette, and you said you were going to tell me the truth. Well, you haven't I've done my part of the bargain, and you have not. So put it down. And then we would, then they might get the cigarette back. So it's a tool within the room to, again, develop a relationship in there. And you don't want to be a person that's not open to listening to what they say. So there you go.
I'm just happy to hear that there was no interview room in your home for your children. So now I feel better.
I did have my office in the room, and I'm sure my office in the house, and I'm sure they considered it to be an interview room. That was whenever I said we're going upstairs to talk.
Oh boy.
That was not good.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's never a good thing. Ketchup, don't mess with Phil t-shirts, please. I absolutely love how straightforward and honest Phil is. Oh, he does have a soft side, looking after Joel, and how rude of whoever said that about Joel and his mom. And then Deb says, definitely some don't mess with Phil t-shirts. And Scott is here to balance this show out. Love it. And now on to Lori Vallow Daybell. Scott, there's no doubt this woman has got some issues, and that is a quite an understatement there. Do you think, in your expert opinion, and you're not a lawyer, but you're a former FBI agent, do you think most of these jurors, having heard what they've heard so far from her son and close friends who basically describe her as being completely wackadoodle, do you think most of these jurors have already made up their mind? And by the way, there is no court today because they're moving at such a fast clip. Some people say this 8-week trial could be over in the next week or two. So they decided to take the day off. But do you think the jurors have made up their mind, Scott?
Yeah, as I said way in the beginning of the show, is that you never know about a jury. So, but I do believe jurors can make up their mind pretty early in. Once, especially when prosecution starts putting on some key witnesses, and if it only takes something to strike them, and where they make up their mind, then so be it. As long, they're going to keep their mind open as it goes through, and especially when the defense gets their chance to counteract the narrative and the argument. But I do believe you have certain jurors that are absolutely very attentive, listen to everything, will counterbalance whatever they hear, and will be very comfortable once that trial is over, not have to go through everything, where the jury foreman is saying, okay, let's look at all the evidence and blah, blah, blah. They'll be like, hey, I have my mind up. Let's go for a vote. And there will be a vote to see where people are at. So I do believe you definitely have, in that pool of 12, that you have people who have very well made up their mind early in the case. They liked what they heard. Everybody that was presented is credible to them, and so thereby they make an assessment. It doesn't mean they've closed off the defense if they counteract it, but they know. That's why jurors are very smart, and listen with the keen ear, and they're watching the body movements and the facial expressions. So it's that absolutely there will be those, and then there will be those that will go back and forth, maybe even non-committal to the very end. But I do believe, yeah, a good prosecution, once they put on some good witnesses, that jurors have made a decision, are willing to overturn their decision, but no doubt have made their decision.
And Phil, this is an interesting point that Michelle Burns brings up in this comment. I'm concerned that the prosecution has not linked Bad Lori to the murders. Defense is being quiet, and I think they have a trick up their sleeve. What are the chances that Lori walks free? So she's charged with murder and also conspiracy, but and there's smoke all over the place, but actually linking her with any kind of direct evidence to these murders seems to be the challenge for the state. What say you, Phil?
What I have seen thus far is you use the term direct link. So I don't believe they have any direct evidence to Lori Vallow. But the circumstantial evidence is so strong that I believe it's overwhelming. I think I've had cases where the circumstantial evidence was stronger than cases where I had direct evidence. I think this is one of those. The people that they put in there as witnesses to her I think the prosecution is doing a good job in laying out how we get to where we are with her. I mean, look, I have a recording of her in a beauty contest when she was 18 in Austin, Texas. And this is on the audio where they asked her, they're asking her the typical goofy ass questions, and she makes the comment, well, I'm a ticking time bomb. Well, really? That was certainly prophetic. So I don't see that the prosecution has a problem. I think the defense has a problem of putting anybody on that stand that is going to be painting a picture of her of being a loving mother and wife. I mean, good grief. She's got at least 5 or 6 bodies around her. She's been married 5 times. And now the allegation here is that she murdered these children, and it's all got this cult, ritualistic flavor to it. And I just don't see how the defense paints a picture of her that is in any way, shape, or form going to be able to tone down what she has projected for years. So I think like Scott, I can't imagine when they get in there and they haven't already made up their minds. I mean, this stuff is, it's kind of like the Murdaugh case on steroids in a lot of ways. I mean, this is, holy cow. Now, she's not getting on the stand. I don't think they'll put her on the stand. Surely not. But when there have been reports of her, when they were showing the bodies at the other defendant's place, and there was a bucket, I think, there with body, human body fat and skin, and things like that, and then the condition that the bodies were in, duct tape and bags over heads and arms and being broken and that kind of thing. And she left the courtroom. They got her out of the courtroom because and then when she came back in, it looked like she'd been crying and that kind of thing. And then she didn't want to sit there while they showed these pictures. And the judge said, no, you're going to sit here. So it may be one of those moments where she's stepping away from her, this image she's conveying, to go, oh crap, this is what I actually did. And it overwhelmed her. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating. So for all those people that are going to go, I'm just speculating here. So she didn't want to see it. So that, to me, that's very, very telling. And the judge says, no, if the jury has to sit here and watch what you are alleged to have done, then you're going to sit here and watch it as well. I think that is awesome. Good call for the judge. And what people may or may not know, because we have this, I know my 23 years, I think I've already talked about, when I was in narcotics, especially, I talked about the occult. I talked about cults. I talked about those kinds of things. And I only seen in my career one case where I could maybe categorize it as a ritual killing. Now, this one, when you mix in all of these religious components to it, I would be right there by saying that in many ways, this was a ritual killing. This was a ritualistic killing of these children, because she invokes the name of Christ. She's got this Mormon background. She's got all of these things going on in terms of her head and her reported, conveyed religious beliefs. And look, this stuff of sacrificing children because she thought they were zombies, or sacrificing children because it was going to benefit them or benefit her and her counterpart in another way. This goes back to the Old Testament when the Ammonites were sacrificing their children to Moloch. So, folks, this is a very complicated thing in terms of her philosophy. and her ideology and how she comes to do such a horrible thing. And it's got, in my view, it may have some mental illness, but I'm telling you, this is evil personified in this woman and her confederate that are together sacrificing these children to whatever evil entity they're sacrificing them to. So make no mistake, there's a whole lot of moving parts here going on in this investigation. And it's interesting to me to watch how the detectives and the prosecution has taken all these affirmative links and brought it together, and they are now peeling back the onion on her. And they are revealing to that jury just how depraved this whole thing was. And again, the defense is being quiet because in my opinion, the defense doesn't have a defense. I will be shocked if they put anybody on that stand. I just don't. I mean, they may do it just to say they did it. Just let's check the box. We gave her the best defense we could give her, which she is due, and so forth and so on. So this is a very interesting. And remember, the jury is getting to see her in person. When they're watching these things that are on that screen, when they're listening to these people testifying, I can tell you they're looking at her and they want to see how she is reacting. And so it's a very, and I'm sure it, again, like Scott, I think when they get back in that jury room, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of questions about where people are.
And that's an interesting take, the way Fil just described it. Never really looked at it as the kids being sacrificial lambs. But that is interesting. This comment, just to veer off course for 1 second, caught my attention. I wanted Fil to respond. Fil, my 16-year-old son plans on joining the Marines after high school. I'm scared to death for him. Please reassure me that they will not be mean to my son. Side note, I'm extremely proud of him.
Well, and is it DB?
DB.
And as you should be, DB. I would tell you this. I am very upset and disappointed about the way the leadership in the Marine Corps is headed. And they are dismantling the Marine Corps bit by bit. The social engineering has finally hit the Marines. And so to tell you that they won't be mean to him, I think there's a possibility that they may not be mean to him. But,
Fil would hope that they will.
I'm old school. It breaks my heart. It enrages me the way they are destroying the tradition and the requirements and to achieve the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And it's depressing. So,
Fil, were they ever mean to you when you were a Marine?
Were they mean to me?
You're drill sergeant.
Oh, I don't think I knew. Look, boot camp, OCS is designed to break you down to zero and then build you up to be a Marine. And it's not for everybody. So to say, I will tell you the things that I went through officer candidate school at Quantico, and my drill instructor then, my platoon sergeant then, just back from Vietnam, Purple Heart, Silver Star, Bronze Star. This guy was the real deal. And he had us do some things that, had I not done them, I would have felt cheated. Mm. And so I never looked at it in the sense that he was being mean to me. So
Well, now we've got two shows, one about the art of the interview and Fil as a Marine. We'll get those lined up. Barbara says hello from Belgium. Happy to have her. And the chief marketing officer, I guess, is lurking because she has put a link for you guys in the chat room to the merch store. Look at this. Followed here by Tara, who says, I respect Fil even more now. I'm a woman who lost an extended amount of family in the Holocaust, and I myself gone through anti-Semitism and hate. Love to you and your mother, Joel. Sorry to hear that you lost those people, but glad that Fil is speaking up here. And Elf says, Scott's voice is so soothing. Yes, it is. The voice of reason. So Scott, to you, Colby Ryan, the surviving child of Lori Vallow, there was a jail call between him and his mother. And he says to her in this call, among many things, do you think you can hide from me? And he says that he didn't want to talk to her. Lori says that, and he says it's probably because you murdered my siblings. And he goes on to say, I have prayed for you in my worst moments. I have prayed for my siblings who you swore to me were okay. I thought I could trust you, Mom. He didn't say Mom, but I thought I could trust you. I thought that you were a completely different person. And she responds saying, you have known me your whole life. And he counters by saying, I don't know a murderous mother. I mean, what kind of impact emotionally does this exchange have on jurors who are going to decide the fate of Lori Vallow Daybell, Scott?
Yeah, prison tapes. They are extremely impactful. So you have a volley between mom and son, and from at least from the the transcript side, that you've known me your whole life, and is that a mother's words? Is that a mother's soothing counteraction to, hey, it's not me, it's not nothing to see here. It's very impactful. You're talking about everybody has an experience, if not with mom and dad, definitely with somebody they can say very close to mom and dad, right? It's and everybody has, not everybody, but a significant amount of people can speak to a very loving relationship, and so when you hear those tapes, they're just continuing to solidify, putting the prosecution forward, and continue to, if there is any doubt in a juror's mind of how, because they are all thinking, how can a mother or a father, but how can a parent do this to someone, then that prison tape counteracts that question. And so that's why these prison tapes are so important. And you not only see a transcript of the words, but then to actually hear the voice, they're able to make a decision, because that's what they're there for, to make decisions of what is going on behind this conversation. And would I, as a juror, mother or father, if they're in one of those shoes, to be able to say, that just sounds way out of place. It doesn't sound like something I would say. So thereby, it helps them make their decision even more guilty, not guilty.
Shout out to Beth, who's watching in Denmark. Fil, do you agree with Lindsay, who says that Lori still thinks she's going to stand before her God with her children she killed? Do you think that she believes that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I've heard the jail phone call between her son and her, and it is in a lot of ways, well, in many ways, it's heartbreaking, and the way he talks to her, that is just with a lot. Here's what my comment was about this on another on another show. If you listen to his discussion,
hold on.
with her,
There's another show. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because he's telling her that as much as he hates what she's done, he loves her, he prays for her every day, and he is apparently a Christ follower and conveys that to her and tells her that at the same time that he is so angry with her about what she's done. At one moment, he's very passionate about expressing that to her, and in the next moment, he is very compassionate about what he wants to ultimately happen to her. So people ought to listen to that. It's an amazing exchange. Now she's going to be before her maker, and she's going to answer for what she's done. There's no doubt about it. So this business about her, because her exchange with him is, you don't know what happened. You don't know what happened, this and that and this and that, and so forth and so on. And, the more I listen to her, if there was ever an example of the possibility of demonic possession, this woman is a pretty good close example to it. It is really interesting to listen to her. And I'm not listening to her based on emotion. I'm listening to her based on what I've done for 23 years. And I've talked to people like this. And I'm telling you, it's a whole different mindset. And I will tell you the bottom line though, if you take the religious aspects of this thing out of it, this whole episode is all about sex and money when it comes down to it. So it's just a really interesting case because there are so many moving parts in the investigation and what causes someone to do something like this to their own children. It's an amazing case to study.
Yeah, and Phil, so here's another example. This is I'd like your take on this here. So this is another exchange between Colby and his mom. He says to her, "My own mom, my siblings, my whole family, my dad, everyone is gone except my mom, and you're in jail because of it. I have prayed to Heavenly Father myself and asked him to help me survive this. Why are you following Chad down the rabbit hole? Why would you follow anyone who is not good? I pray every day, no matter how mad I am at you, no matter how bad I want to hit your husband in the face with a shovel. I pray for you. I pray for him. You ripped my heart out. You ripped everyone's heart out." My question to you, are you surprised with his mother as a very poor role model with religion, that he is a man who seems to still have tremendous faith and is cleaving to God in the worst of times? Are you surprised by that?
Well, I'm not, because that's a great example of someone who has come to know Jesus Christ as their Savior, and he is doing exactly what Christ tells us to do, which is to love others as we love ourselves. And in this particular case, it's his mom. The young man, if you listen to the call, he is so passionate about what he's trying to get across to her. And I don't think this isn't coming out of Mormonism. This is coming out of a relationship with Jesus Christ. So where she's coming from, that's where she's coming out of that. And she's taken that stuff and perverted all that. But this thing with the co-defendant and all of that, that was a situation where they got together and fed off of one another. And now here we have what we have. This is one of these deals where, there's somebody for everybody. And boy, they found each other, and that was to the demise and the destruction of everybody else around them, which is another strange aspect of this whole investigation, this whole case.
And I want to get Scott's take on one more thing, and then we'll start to wrap it up. But Catherine says, love the show. Always interesting guests and questions. Love from South Africa. And the adopted daughter, Taha Ha, just got my T-shirt ordered. Thanks, Joel and team. That's amazing. Got it. You got to, I don't even know how you do it. Hashtag us on Instagram or whatever you do. And I will be sure to share the photos. If anyone gets merch, you got to share it with me. I would love to see those pictures. Scott, to you. I mean, the level of crazy is just sort of astonishing. And this is coming off the Alec Murdaugh trial, but this, I think, takes it even to a further degree of nuttiness. So a lot of her, Lori's friends now have testified, a handful. And it's interesting to hear from them because I don't know. I try to maybe put myself in their shoes and think, if I was talking to Lori Vallow, I would think she was totally insane, and maybe I would have tried to do something. But it's very easy to Monday morning quarterback. But according to April Raymond, a friend in Hawaii, who seems to be the most kind of rational and stable of the group, she says that Lori Vallow told her she found evidence of Charles Vallow having an affair. As a result, she canceled his credit card, took his keys, moved his truck from the airport lot, et cetera, and then went on to say that Lori also told her that Lori tried to gather April Raymond so she could join the 144,000, which is a group in certain religions who are believed to be holier beings sent to earth to assist with the second coming of Jesus Christ. And many friends testified that Lori Vallow thought she was the leader of the 144,000. These are things that, again, a normal person says are sort of crazy. Jurors are the most normal of normal. They are just kind of handpicked, basically out of, the air. Are these jurors right now saying, wow, what have we gotten ourselves into here? I mean, this is just flat out insane. This woman is crazy. And then the question is, there's no insanity defense. So I'm just curious, I guess, what you think is going on in the minds of these jurors right now.
Thinking they probably wish they were somewhere else at this time and not picked for the jury. Yeah, I mean, we're remember going back before the charges were even levied, and they were just simply trying to get the this couple to go ahead and say, just tell us where your children are, and seeing them in flip-flops and hand in hand and looking like there's no care in the world, and that didn't look like two people who had committed homicides, and not just homicides, but homicides of children, their children, so or Lori's children. So, and then of course one piece after another came out about a missing individual, a brother, a husband, and it just was bodies were dropping, and here two amazing stories at two different parts of the country, the Murdaughs and the Vallows. It's just an amazing and how they come to light in the same year. But I think the jury ultimately are probably thinking this is even worse than I thought or hadn't imagined. And to hear the stories now firsthand from witnesses and accounts, it's maybe they're thinking she's crazy, but they're also going to be thinking there's no one else who did it. Ultimately, it comes down to, did they do it? And so thereby, if they did it, then they'll find for a conviction, guilty, regardless of what the motives are or the crazy aspects of the whys, whether I'm the leader of the 144,000 coming to save the world, and so thereby I've been commissioned to to remove anybody that stands in the way that are not part of the 144. It's, loved ones or not loved ones. So regardless, I think there's a lot of crazy here, but crazy doesn't mean that you're not um, capable and being able to say, hey, they may not be part of it, but I don't have any power over them to remove them from this earth. I don't have the power to commit homicide and then to not stand trial. So the jurors are definitely getting a lot to consume here, but I don't think it will take away from their ultimate duty to, at the end, for all of them to come together and say guilty. There is no insanity defense here, right? So it's not something that is on the table, and so I think they'll be able to make a rational and conclusive decision.
And it seems that decision will come sooner than later. What was anticipated to be an 8-week trial. And by the way, to Phil's point, a lot of legal experts have told us there is no defense here, and the defense likely will not call any witnesses. So this could wrap up much quicker than anyone anticipated. A final Lori Vallow quote. She is quoted as saying, "I no longer need to sleep very much. I am awoke very much. I become woken up constantly by angels giving me instructions on things that I can do to help further the Father's work. The time is now. The Lord is gathering his people." So that is a little glimpse inside the mind of Lori Vallow. Beebs B, interesting comment just because of where she is. "I'm so happy that I caught you guys live. You usually make me company while doing weekend chores. Sending love from Slovakian born and bred, currently living in sunny Athens, Greece."
Wow.
So the global show continues to get even more global. And then Michelle, hashtag Carmi. A funny thing here, my grandmother called my mother Carmi. That was her name. That was her nickname. So we will have to get camouflage tees that say Carmi, and on the back it could say "Don't mess with Phil."
Well, I think I think what my suggestion would be is I get the haters. I take the heat off of Scott. So I think we put me on the front of the T-shirt and Scott on the back, or vice versa. But that way they can get one of us either coming or going.
I love it. I love it. With that, you're looking at two of the best former investigators in all the land, the great Scott Duffey, former FBI ace agent. Scott, any closing thoughts on anything? Will you say no to your children this week, or will you say yes?
Yeah, it all depends who's home. It's they know now not even to ask me anything. They're just they're gonna go do it. So it's they're good. They're leaving their teenage years, entering into their 20s, two almost out, and so I've been pretty proud of them. And next week it is law enforcement conference time. So for all those that are going to be joining us for law enforcement conference, we have people coming from all over the country to present, and I'm looking forward to that.
Well, is that it? Where is that at Wilmington?
That will be in Wilmington at a nearby hotel because they have the space. We didn't, and we have quite a collection of presenters to share their stories. So it's been in the work for a year, and now we'll see it come to fruition next week.
Where was my invitation?
You'll be a key presenter next year.
Next year you will be there, Phil. Look at this.
Oh boy!
Look at this from Catherine Regier. Mother's Day around the corner. Joel, get something nice for Best Mom Carm. That is one of the sweetest things. Thank you so much. Unnecessary. Thank you. I have to figure out what to get her. A woman who has everything. Donna says, can't figure out how to get merch. I think if you go to YouTube, there is a link on the actual YouTube page The only person who knows less than you, Donna, is me. But I will get with the chief marketing officer and we will roll this out officially next week. The man who has mastered the interview room is Fil Waters, a detective for 117 years. He continues to interview and interrogate people. Even if he goes to Costco, he is interrogating you at the checkout line. But I am happy to learn that he does not have an interview room for his kids in his house. Fil, when you go to Walmart in your red Ferrari, let's just say, are you always looking around? I've asked you this before, but just from the time you get out of your car, especially a place like a Walmart, which God forbid we know has become a target in some ways, not to be confused with Target, of crazy people and mass shootings. When you walk into a place like a Walmart, does your antenna immediately go up? Is your antenna always up? I'm very curious about this.
Well, first, I know you're never supposed to say never, but I never go to Walmart in my Ferrari.
You go in your minivan.
If I'm ever seen in a minivan driving, somebody needs to pull me out of that car and beat me to a pulp. But, which I'm sure there's probably some people on here that would relish that, no doubt. But to answer your question, yeah, I tell you, it isn't limited to Walmart. I can tell you that I think I've said it on here before. I don't care if I'm sitting in a restaurant, if I'm sitting in church. It doesn't matter to me where I am sitting. There is evil in the world, and it manifests itself in all places. And I do what I can do after my experience and my years of training to be prepared to interrupt something like that happening to the degree that people might not suffer.
That's a very nice way of saying that he's upholding his oath to protect and serve, and he's protecting people. So on that lovely note, quick note on our end, Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, the matriarch, Carmi, will be here, and we're actually working to do an entire show on the Menendez brothers. But then 5 seconds before I went on air today, Carm called, all worked up, that she's fascinated by Vallow Daybell. She's a former therapist. She's fascinated by her friends and wants to do something on that. So now I have to fight with Carm behind the scenes to see what she wants to do. Look at this. A round of coffees. You three men are amazing. Fil, God bless you for speaking out about evil. Very kind. I will have to send Scott and Fil a Starbucks. Fil, do you go to Starbucks? I cannot see you entering a Starbucks.
Oh, I do not go to Starbucks. Are you freaking kidding me?
I didn't think so. I did not think
I don't drink coffee.
Oh, you don't? Ever?
I have a legitimate reason not to ever go to Starbucks.
Hold on. You never drank coffee even when you were working?
No.
Wow. What would you drink, Fil? I'm curious.
Water. Tea, Dr. Pepper, milk. Love milk.
Wow.
But and occasionally a Gentleman Jack on the rocks.
Look at the things you learn on this show. Amazing.
Well,
Scott,
I'll tell you,
a coffee drinker, Scott?
very quickly.
Yes.
There's a reason why. There's always a reason why I do or don't do something. So very quickly, the reason why I don't drink coffee is when I was about 9 years old, my dad was a voracious coffee drinker, and he drank iced coffee. He put cream in it and all that good stuff. And when my mom would mix the pot up and he had some left over, she would take this big goblet and she would pour all that iced coffee into this goblet and put it in the refrigerator. So one day at the age of about 9, I was looking in the refrigerator and I saw this big goblet up there that I thought was chocolate milk. So I picked it up and I immediately started chugging it. And I realized about halfway down, this was not chocolate milk. So that has had a lifelong effect on me. I won't say I've never drunk coffee. 2 times. Once was at a Denny's in Jacksonville, North Carolina, which is where Camp Lejeune is, at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And you can probably determine why I was there drinking coffee at that time in the morning. And the second time was in Dawn Patrol in Sardinia when I was a liaison with the Italian Marines, and they had this coffee that was in their rations, and they also had, and they offered it to me, and I said no, and they said, well, you need to put this in it, and it was this cream that came in what looked like a toothpaste tube, and so I squeezed about half that tube into this coffee and mixed it up, and it turned into a kind of a coffee malt. And I did drink that. It was quite good, as a matter of fact. And I do like coffee ice cream, but to drink coffee, no.
3 final comments. ACAB True Crime. I overdosed on caffeine coffee one time, and it was not pretty. Julie in the UK. I hate coffee. Followed by, what a way to end this. Edie Ruth says, I love Phil. And with that, we will say.
Let me, one more thing. My adopted daughter here said you can fit more groceries in a Pacifica, Phil, which is the Chrysler crossover, whatever they call it. And I just wanted to tell her that my brother used to own a Pacifica.
There you go, but not Phil. He never will.
Not me.
And by the way, Abby sent us, and I forgot to do it this week. I'll do it next week. A photo. She caught Phil behind the wheel in a minivan, and we will put that up next week.
Oh yeah, yeah. That was great.
That was Abby. That was
Abby.
that
is awesome. That is awesome.
Time to go get my kids from school. Now my work begins.
That needs to be on a T-shirt, by the way.
We'll get it. We'll get it on a T-shirt.
Yeah.
Love you, America. Love you, Wilmington. Love you, Houston.